Awesome. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick it off, and we're on the chapter two employers, and we're on page 145. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the bottom paragraph of page 145. And sort of what we've been talking about over the last few weeks is, and even like really the requirements for what is asked of the employer to be willing to help an ailing employee, an employee that's suffering from alcoholism. And we were at first, we were really like, man, here are some humanitarian reasons, the reasons in which, in terms of humanity, alcoholics could be saved or should possibly be saved. And then we had to look at some other reasons like financial. But before we make any decisions on saving or trying to help these employees, we have to have an understanding of what the prerequisites are. So last week we were diving into some of the prerequisites of, what it takes to be willing, or what the employer needs to agree to ahead of time. And last week, where we left off is we were talking about confidentiality, and we were talking about gossip, and we were talking about rumors, and it was talking about how, alcoholics, I'm sure no one relates, but we at times, shocking, can be a little sensitive and think that people are talking about us. I'm sure no one would ever think that. Some people are like, is she talking about me right now? uh, and it's saying often that's not so, but there are times where drinking can be used politically, or people having a hard time can be used politically in the realm of business. So that sort of sets the stage of where we're kicking off this week. Very bottom paragraph 145. It says, one instance comes to mind in which a malicious individual, to be malicious is to be intentionally harmful. So somebody who's being like intentionally mean and harmful, um, was always making friendly little jokes about an alcoholic's drinking exploits. Those jokes that are not jokes, that are just little digs at somebody. That's what it's referring to. And I know nobody here at this Big Book study would ever do anything like that, especially with their spouse, and especially with their spouse when they don't put away their socks. You left your socks out again. I just love that, those little digs, I'm not married. I can't figure out why. I'm just kidding. Already. It says, in another case, an alcoholic was sent to a hospital for treatment. Only a few knew of it at first, but within a short time, it was billboarded throughout the entire company. I was just driving around I wasn't driving. I was just sitting as a passenger around the Midwest, and you should see the billboards. So those billboards are those, everyone knew and everyone saw it. And if you're approaching, what is it, Indiana, they got a lot of the fireworks ones because they got fireworks there. I know, because of the billboard. So what they're saying is like this confidential information was made available to everyone. So it says, naturally, this sort of thing decreased the man's chance of recovery. But keep in mind, one of the things that we talk about, especially in the later chapters, is that my sobriety is not contingent on anything outside of myself. My sobriety is contingent upon that relationship that I build with God as the result of these 12 steps. So that decreases our chance of recovery. But man, my sobriety cannot be contingent on anything outside of myself. So it doesn't completely wipe out my chance of recovery. You know what I'm saying? And listen, I will let you know I have been absolutely gossiped about, less lately because I've gotten much less interesting. And, like, what are you going to talk about? She's weird? We know. We know. That's no secret. So spoken about a lot less. But I know how hurtful that was. But, in those cases, it has been an opportunity for me to lean into God, lean into these 12 steps, and cultivate a fellowship. You know what I mean? A fellowship of people who aren't struggling with that defect of gossip. I know. Alrighty, so it says, naturally, this sort of thing decreased the man's chance of recovery. The employer can many times protect the victim from this kind of talk. The employer cannot play favorites. Oh man, no, I'm sure I'm the only one where it's like, I want to be the favorite, like me the best. I I think it's was it Clancy I that used to say, "All I need is to be a little bit special all the time." Completely reasonable, right? Just gotta be the favorite at all times. All right. Unfortunately, for my delicate sensibilities, the employer cannot play favorites, but he can always defend a man from needless provocation to provoke is to start a fight and unfair criticism. Now, that was talking about some unfair criticism. Here is one of the few places in the book we get compliments. Now, often we need to like do like the spiritual heavy lifting of 4 through 9 before the book will say some nice things about us. On 21, it talks about how like we got some we build things up, we have a bright future, all of that. But here is where we get some compliments and we didn't have to do anything for it. So it says, as a class, alcoholics are energetic people. Thank you. Babe and I are here and we're like, yeah, woo. And some of you guys are like, settle down. So did they only meet Babe and Paige? Is that only who they're talking about? But we're energetic people. They work hard and they play hard. Yeah. And the yeah might actually not be a good thing because I you know deviated so hard on the plane that I didn't always make it for work. Anywho, your man should be on his mettle to make good. So this man who is now recovered, who is working these 12 steps as a way of life, should not have just, now we're going to talk about some of the formal amends sort of stuff, but that change in behavior, you know what I mean? The type of person that I need to be when I show up to all areas of my life, somebody with integrity, on my mettle to make good, doing my utmost to set things right. And it said, being somewhat weakened and faced with physical and mental readjustment to a life which knows no alcohol, he may overdo. You may have to curb his desire to work 16 hours a day. And if you guys remember in the family afterward, it said alcoholics as a rule take one of two directions. One is where we dive headlong into work and into business, and the other is where we dive headlong into spirituality. And it really warns us against diving headlong into work, into business, into getting on our feet financially, like really working 16 hours a day. It's like, that's not a good thing to do. But I will say that I maybe will just speak for myself, that at times, by chance, I've been known to be a person of extremes. I know, I'm sure I'm just the only one, where it's like I'm a little all or nothing and diving all in, and I got to do it 16 hours a day. So it says, you may need to encourage him to play once in a while. He may wish to do a lot for other alcoholics, and something of the sort may come up during business hours. A reasonable amount of latitude will be helpful. So giving him a little bit of like slack and letting him take calls and letting him, do those things to work with others. And this line is important. This work is necessary to maintain his sobriety. Again, a theme that we see throughout this whole thing. If I want permanent, contented sobriety, I've got to be working with other alcoholics or other addicts or whatever brings you to this all inclusive study. I have got to be working with others. This work is not a delightful afterthought. This work is not for the extra special sort of drunks, extra special sort of drug addicts. This work is necessary for somebody like me to stay sober. I've got to work with others. I have to work with others. So again, just reiterating again and again and again. So it says, after your man has gone along without drinking for a few months. And again, this is a bit longer in the length of sobriety referenced, a few months. What I want to pause and talk about is that idea that it does not take long to get well. It does not take long to recover. It does not take long to have a spiritual awakening. Goodness gracious, it does not take long to work these steps, to get that foundation of all 12 steps working in my life. It does not take long. And in a few months, you may be able to make use of his services with other employees who are giving you the alcoholic runaround, provided, of course, they're willing to have a third party in the picture. So after a few months, the alcoholic recovered can basically help 12-step other people within the company. I don't think they let you do that with HR nowadays. Like, I think there's like some HIPAA. I don't know if it's HIPAA. I don't know. I don't know this confidentiality stuff, but again, it does not take long to get well. And sometimes, man, if we're new or if we're struggling, that might feel like, oh goodness, you're wanting me to go quickly. But man, relief is through the work. You know what I'm saying? So if you're hurting, if you're struggling, if you're in pain, if you're drowning from your illness that is untreated, what I want you, yeah, it could be FOIP. Cheryl put in the chat FOIP. And if you're like, could you tell me what FOIP stands for? Nope. Nope, I cannot. I can't even get the F on FOIP. I don't know. Federal? I don't know. But I said it with confidence. It's definitely FOIP. That's the thing. You just make up acronyms and it sounds like you work in HR. I got some friends who work in HR who probably do not appreciate that I said that. And who are like, Paige, you are the least likely person to work in HR. You are not HR friendly. I'm aware already. But confidentiality and all that. So it says an alcoholic who has recovered. There is that word again. And often we find we talk a lot about recovered. Recovered does not mean cured. But what recovered means, oh, we got it. FOIP means freedom of information and protection of privacy. It's that I got in the chat. Now, I was supposed to define something actually helpful and actually important, which is recovered. But the chat took me. I always forget to announce this. If you got questions, throw it in the chat. If you would like me to go on a tangent, throw it in the chat. We'll go on a journey. It'll be delightful. Will we finish 2 employers today? That's the goal. Let's see if I can land this plane. Alrighty. Recovered does not mean cured. Recovered means that the mental obsession, the insane thought that I have when I am as sober as I am today, but my illness is untreated, is removed. And it gets removed through the process of the 12 steps, which brings about a spiritual awakening. That is what it means to be recovered, to be living in the promises of the 10th step, that it is removed. So recovered. So an alcoholic who has recovered, but holds a relatively unimportant job, can talk to a man with a better position. See, I could help in HR. I should not help in HR. That's no. Being on, and I love this, a radically different basis of life. See, these 12 steps, I talk about it a lot. These 12 steps are not a set it and forget it program. I'm not doing this for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. These 12 steps is how I live my life. And some of you who might be a little bit more new might be like, yeah, girl, that's pretty radical. Like the steps, you mean the ones I saw on the wall? That's radical. I don't want to do those. But this is a basis for life, and it is a radically different way in which I live my life. This is not a set it and forget it deal. So being on a radically different basis of life, he will never take advantage of the situation. Now, that's a different sort of promise. But what I also want to say about that is the faith that Hank has in the program of recovery is outlined in this book. The faith that Hank had in these 12 steps. He didn't know me. I mean, obviously, he had never met me. I was not alive. I was not even a twinkle in anyone's eyes. You know what I'm saying? He did not know who I was. And yet that is what he's saying about me. And also, perhaps that's what he's saying about all of us. You know, to say that a recovered alcoholic, a recovered addict, a recovered whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study is a person who will never take advantage if they are living this way of life. That is the faith and trust that he has in this. And just in case you think I'm making things up, it says your man may be trusted. Again, a different sort of promise. And again, speaking about somebody like me, somebody like us, those of us who have recovered. And it says long experience with alcoholic excuses naturally arouses suspicion. When his wife next calls saying he is sick, you might jump to the conclusion he is drunk. Now this next line is one of 3 places in the book And I was talking about this ahead of time. This is one of the three places in the book that it talks about what to do after a relapse, after coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason is because if I follow these directions as outlined in this book, it would be rare to relapse. It's not a common thing, although we might go to our local meetings, our home groups, and we see it as a common thing. But when I follow the directions as outlined in this book, it's not common. It's not, I don't know too many people who have done this work and continue to do this work relapse. In fact, I don't know anyone. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but what I'm saying is this silly little drunk and this silly little drug addict has not seen anyone who has done this work and continues to do this work relapse. I've not seen it. So this is the second direction. The first direction was on page 120, redouble our and its spiritual efforts. That was the first one. This is the second one. It says, if he has relapsed, if he has drank again and is still trying to recover, he will tell you about it, even if it means the loss of his job. So what it is saying is I need to be honest about relapse. Ooh, how often have you been working with a sponsee and they've relapsed? And man, sometimes it's the hardest thing when like child and family services or child welfare is involved and they're so afraid of losing their kid, or the court system is involved, parole, probation, all of those things are involved, and they don't want to, or their boss gave them one last chance, and we don't want to get honest about it. And I don't tell anyone what they have to do or how they have to show up, but I can take them to page 146, and this is what is recommended. He will tell you about it, even if it means the loss of his job, for he knows that he must be honest if he would live at all. That's what we're talking about. He will appreciate knowing that you aren't bothering your head about him, that you are not suspicious, nor are you trying to run his life so he will be shielded from temptation to drink. And I want to point something out on page 100. Page 100 in Working with Others, it talks about very bottom paragraph, page 100, it says, assuming we are spiritually fit, we can do all sorts of things alcoholics are not supposed to do. And it gives a list. And then it goes on to talk about how, man, the moment you try to shield an alcoholic from temptation, that is going to be noticed. We are going to see it. We see it on page 101. And you guys know, I can't be the only one who had people in my life that would try to hide the bottles from me, or try to oh, don't talk about drinking. You can feel that. Yeah. Oh, yes. And I got a message in the chat. There are 3 things and I only mentioned 2. Now, the third, it's really helpful when we put things in chat because I will just go on a tangent at a moment's notice. Will I finish my initial thought? I don't know. It's an adventure. Stick around, find out. But the third direction on what to do if we've relapsed after coming to Alcoholics Anonymous or 12-Step Fellowship, we're going to see in the chapter A Vision for You, as well as mirrored with the chapter Dr. Bob's Nightmare. Now, it's not a literal description, here's what you do, but we get to see by example of what we do. So I am saving that as a cliffhanger, ooh, keep coming back for the thrilling conclusion of what do we do? I mean, or you could just throw it in the chat and be like, no, I want to know now, and I'll tell you, because I'm not free of the defect of needing y'all to like me. So if you're I won't like you if you don't do it, I will. I kind of let God into that area a little more, apparently. Alrighty. So back to 147, it says, if he is conscientiously following the program of recovery, he can go anywhere your business may call him. And again, that's mirrored on page 101. So what we saw, page 100, 101, that idea of you can't shield me from temptation. Listen, if you throw me out into the Midwest, I actually know some people out here and I make friends quite easily. I was saying how I loved Indiana because there are strangers that would say hi to me in the Kroger, and that's sort of my sensibility. It's just making friends. They're like, could you not do that in downtown Chicago? I'm like, I'm making friends. Not appreciated. Well, I mean, my friends did. I was telling, oh, girl, I love your shoes. That's how I do. You can't take me anywhere. Uh, but you know, the idea is you can throw me out to somewhere I don't know a single other soul, but we know what we can find each other. You know what I mean? I can find the booze, I can find the drugs. And we were at a Kroger in Indiana, and they had a 40 for like $10 American, a 40 of vodka for $10 American. I'm like, I would die. I right? Thank you. Some of you guys see the like, yes. I don't think it was good quality vodka, but like, and I do not think I would survive, like at all. I was like, you guys, I would die here. Yeah, I don't think that my travel insurance would cover, imminent liver failure. Uh, I don't know, maybe it would. I didn't look into the terms and conditions too quickly or too thoroughly. I'm like, it's fine. I'll just go to America. Alrighty. So like wherever I go, there I am. But if I am conscientiously following this program of recovery as outlined in this book, I can go to the Midwest. I can go to Fort Wayne, Indiana, where they have the $10 40s, and I'm okay. I'm in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. So that same promise that we see on page 101 is alive and well on page 147. So page 147, continuing on. In case he does stumble even once, you will have to decide whether to let him go. If you are sure he doesn't mean business, there is no doubt you should discharge him. And even though this is talking about in regards to like an employment situation, oftentimes some of the directions are really helpful in regards to sponsorship. Page 96, if somebody's not interested, let them go, right? That same idea. If I am sure that they're not really interested, I can let them go. But it says, if on the contrary, you are sure he is doing his utmost, you may wish to give him another chance, but you should feel under no obligation to keep him on, for your obligation has been well discharged already. And so the context of that is where, we've offered, detox, and we've offered these 12 steps as a way of life. And if we've given them that as an employer in the context of this chapter, we can say we have done our utmost to help. Now it says there's another thing that you might wish to do. If your organization is a large one, you're junior executive, so that might be like lower management, sort of middle management, that sort of place in a company, might be provided with this book. You might let them know that you have no quarrel. That's no fight. Like, listen, we're not here to like just fire alcoholics. So that there is no quarrel with the alcoholics of your organizations. These juniors are often in a difficult position. Men under them are frequently their friends. So for one reason or another, they cover these men, hoping matters will take a turn for a better. Now, I'm sure no one here has that defect of like avoidance. We just want a ostrich. Although ostriches don't literally ostrich, but I want to put my head in the sand and I want to avoid, or I want to just like, like the house is on fire and it's like, I smell no smoke. It's fine. It's warm in here, but I'm sure it has to do with climate. It's the weather, not the fire. Just avoiding it at all costs. It's in, that's a human reaction, And it says they often jeopardize their own positions by trying to help serious drinkers who should have been fired long ago or else given an opportunity to get well. And it says, after reading this book, a junior executive can go to such a man and say approximately this. And what I found is bottom of 147, the paragraph that I'm about to read is a wonderful example of how to communicate, how to have difficult conversations. I often say it's like a 1930s equivalent of how to set a boundary. And this is the joke that I always make at the bottom of 147 that not a single person has ever found funny, but I make the joke every single time I get here anyways, which is, listen, how I start my boundaries here today, I always start them with, listen here, Ed. So it says, look here, Ed. I just, doesn't matter who I'm talking to. I just, look here, Ed. That's how I set a boundary. Nobody's ever found that funny, but that's what I do. So look here, Ed, do you want to stop drinking or not? You put me on the spot every time you get drunk. It isn't fair to me or the firm. So we're talking about, hey, this, your actions are affecting me, right? And it says, I've been learning something about alcoholism. If you are an alcoholic, you are a mighty sick man. You act like one. The firm wants to help you get over it. And if you're interested, there is a way out. I always want to point out those little ways out, because that was a possible title of this book. Although I think by the time they sent poor little Fitzmayo up to the Library of Congress, they decided they weren't going to use it. So they just set him on an errand to keep him busy. But a way out. It says, if you take it, your past will be forgotten. And the fact that you went away for treatment will not be mentioned. But if you cannot or will not stop drinking, I think you ought to resign. So it's kind of saying like your actions are affecting me. And oftentimes, I'll just be honest, when I'm working with sponsees, it can be really helpful just to name the behavior. And here's my experience. There's times where I'm working with somebody and you can kind of tell when their window of willingness closes. I think it was last week I spoke about how oftentimes when I get into enough pain, drunk or sober, a window of willingness opens, a window where I'm willing to take actions I wasn't willing to do. I was willing to take the actions, I was willing to write that inventory I didn't want to write, to make the amends I didn't want to make, to get daily prayer and meditation and evening review active in my life, to finally sponsor somebody, to do those things, to do that fifth step. But if I don't take action within that window closes. And there's a lot of times I'm working with sponsees and you can watch that window start to close. And what that window starts looking like, it starts looking like rescheduling, starts looking like canceling. It starts looking like, other things becoming really, really important, one after another. And I found it just really important not to judge, not to try to control, but to name what's happening. And it doesn't I've not had it work, but to just say, hey, I can see that your window of willingness is closing. There's been times where I've said, listen, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but here's my experience. I've never had a sponsee that continued to reschedule, stay sober, ever. And I just give that, and you do with that and whatever you want. I'm not telling you what to do, but I give them that information. Here's what I'm seeing. And if you disagree with me, that's okay. And I think that's what it's kind of asking us to do there. Give them the information. What does it mean to be an alcoholic? If you are an alcoholic, you are suffering and you're sick. And if you want help, it's there. You know what I mean? So that was my little tangent on sponsorship. And also, just kind of experientially, oftentimes we don't realize that we're drifting away. Do you know what I'm saying? I can't always see when I'm the one drifting away. It looks like I'm busy. It looks like I'm fine. I don't need to do these things. And so often we get a little defensive when called on it. And I think that's in part human nature. But I feel like I owe it to the people I work with to do the best that I can, to be honest with their situation, whether they agree or see it or not. And I always phrase it like, I could be wrong. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I'm the ultimate authority. Oftentimes I hope I'm wrong. I hope you don't have the illness that I have. I hope you can just hang out, and I don't know what people who have hobbies do, but I'm hoping you can just go do your hobbies and go do your other things. But the truth is, the things that I prioritize are not the things that I reschedule. I do not reschedule or cancel or no-show a priority. If it is a priority, I put that first. So if you're feeling like, am I putting recovery first? Am I prioritizing that? Am I showing up to my commitments? You know what I mean? That's just a helpful thing. And a helpful thing if you're working with people who are starting to kind of drift away, to give them that information. It might not change whether or not they drift away, but it can be helpful. So this I think is so awesome. It says and by the way, it's random to say this. Your junior executive may not agree with the contents of our book. Right? It's like, hey, You don't have to agree. And it goes on to say, well, here's what I want to point out about that. What I want to point out about that is that idea of like, we're talking about results rather than methods. And that was a theme that we saw earlier in this chapter. You don't need to agree with the contents of the book. You can come to the book and this big book study and think it's outdated. You can think it sucks. And despite my fun little breakdown of Two Wives, you can think it like it doesn't apply to women, or you can hate this book. You know what I mean? You can hate the steps. You can hate me, a little harsh. I'll help you inventory me if you'd like. But like, you don't have to be excited about any of this. You can think this is the stupidest thing. But my thoughts about it don't matter. My opinion on it doesn't matter. It works, whether I like it or not, whether I think so or not, whether my opinions, my feelings, my beliefs about it, this thing works. So it doesn't matter. You can be like, I don't agree with that. Cool. You don't have to. Genuinely, you don't have to. But if I follow these directions, I will get well. So it says he need not and often should not show it to his alcoholic prospect, but at least he will understand the problem and will no longer be misled by ordinary promises. And those are those ordinary promises that we all gave time and time again. This time will be different. You know, that idea of like, no, I don't need to go to detox. I'm just going to do this. You know, those promises that if we understand the nature of this illness, we know we cannot keep. You know, I'm really going to stay sober for myself this time. I can't keep that promise. I'm really going to stay sober for my kids this time. I can't keep that promise. You know, I'm going to, you know, whatever it is, you know, I'm going to control it on my own. I'm going to get it under control on my own. I can't, if I have this illness, I can't keep that promise. So he will be so misled by ordinary promises. He will be able to take a position with such a man which is eminently fair and square, and he will have no further reason for covering up an alcoholic employee. And it boils right down to this: no man should be fired just because he's an alcoholic. This paragraph is summarizing all of the work we've done up until this moment in this chapter. It boils right down to this: no man should be fired just because he's an alcoholic. If he wants to stop, he should be afforded a real chance. A real chance. If he cannot or does not want to stop, he should be discharged. That means fired. So if they want to stop, give them a chance. If not, it's saying let them go. The exceptions are few. And that it's one of those things. I've found the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are not black and white, in the sense that there's a little bit of wiggle room. How I do inventory is going to be a little different than how Steve does inventory, or how the Davids do inventory. You know, it might be a little bit different. But here's what I found. There's a few points in this book that are as black and white as black and white can be. And when I accept the black and white reality of my predicament, man, that's when the world opens up. What I mean by that is the bottom of page 25. At the bottom of page 25, it talks about, here's what I got. I got this alcoholic death going on to the bitter ends, blotting out the consciousness of my intolerable situation, or accept spiritual help. It is a black and white predicament. But when I see that I'm in that black and white predicament, when I see that hopelessness, I'm willing to grab a hold of the hope that is the spiritual way of life. And then the world opens up to me. And I don't see the world in such a black and white way. And it's a similar thing here. If I see the black and white reality when referring to alcoholics, I offer them this way of life. If they're willing to get well, I give them everything I got. If they're not willing, I let them go. That again prevents that black and white resentment, sort of that black and white reality avoids the black and white resentment that we have when, man, people aren't doing what we think they should, you know? So it's that black and white starting place that allows the world to come into subtlety or nuance or color, you know? Oh, Technovision. Is it Technovision? I don't know. What was it called when the TVs got colored? Was it, I don't know. Somebody will look it up and put it in the chat. And then we'll go on a tangent about that in the middle of a sentence. That's how that'll go. All right. So we think this method of approach will accomplish several things. It will permit the rehabilitation of good men. At the same time, excuse me, you will feel no reluctance to rid yourself of those who cannot or will not stop. And what we're coming back to is again that he's kind of Hank, who's written this chapter, is kind of now going back into salesman mode, right? So we're summarizing the work we've done. We're summarizing it, boils right down to this, and now he's going back into salesman mode. So he's got a salesman sandwich, which is not as tasty as like a bologna or something. A tuna, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's not a spiritual PB and J. All right, it's salesman. So he's selling at the start and selling at the end. So it says alcoholism may be causing your organization considerable damage in its waste of time, men, and reputation. We hope our suggestions will help you plug up this sometimes serious leak. We think we're sensible when we urge you to stop this waste and give your worthwhile man a chance. Now, you might see the worthwhile and be like, hey, is Hank being a little judgy pants? Worthwhile is not the quality of a human being. In the context of what Hank is saying is those who are able and willing to follow the directions of the 12 steps and recover. That's what he's talking about. But it's also like he's if you guys see, he's kind of doing that same like financial angle. So we started the chapter to employers with that like appeal to the heart, the appeal to humanity, with the tragedy of 3 alcoholics who took their lives. And then it was like a jarring left turn. Probably you guys are like, I feel those left turns when you're like, Page is now mid-sentence and describing what FOIP means. You know what I mean? Like jarring, off we go. And he goes from the like heartbreak and the loss of these human lives to, yeah, it's really expensive to train somebody to be an executive. And man, if they get drunk and kill themselves, that's a waste of money. It's like, whoa, what are we doing? And so keep in mind, this chapter is hopefully like Hank's intention was to go to like companies and corporations and people of business who are not always known for being softies and humanitarians. You know, like go to Wall Street and you're not seeing a lot of like, you know, I love puppies. That actually might be true. Don't let me judge Wall Street based on all the movies and all the things about it. But so he's doing that like two-pronged approach, that appeal to humanity, but also that appeal to like that logic and reason and money and time is money. And so that's what we're seeing him do again. So he's trying to like argue the point of, if you're a business person and you're reading this and you're like, I don't have a problem with alcoholism in my company. It's like, hold on, you might have far more of an alcoholic problem than you think or than you realize. So that's the angle it's taken. So the other day, an approach was made to the vice president of a large industrial concern. Now, I always joke with Hank. Basically, I'm teasing him because Hank is the salesman. Sometimes you'll hear people refer to Bill Wilson as the consummate salesman, like he's a wheeler and dealer. He's a sales guy. He was a stock speculator. He wasn't a salesman by trade. Hank was a salesman by trade. But I will say, ironically, Hank not very good at selling people on things. You know, we already read like Hank's failure to convince this like bank executive to help this alcoholic. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but we're going to see Hank not be the most effective communicator in this case as well. Now, I'm just teasing him because I feel like I communicate like Hank, like all over the place. And keep in mind, Hank is talking to business people who are not interested. So he's doing some like hard sells, you know, or like cold calls almost. Like these are not warm sales people, you know, that are receptive. So Hank's making an approach and he's not selling. So the other day, an approach was made to the vice president of a large industrial concern. He remarked, I'm mighty glad you fellows got over your drinking, but the policy of this company is not to interfere with the habits of our employees. If a man drinks so much that his job suffers, we fire him. I don't see how you can be of any help to us. For, as you can see, we don't have an alcoholic problem. And I feel like Hank was doing all this. He was like, the last guy is like, I spent 2 hours with him. And now like he's probably going and he's probably dragged Bill or Fitz with him and they're trying. And he's like, nope, we don't have a problem. Anyone ever had to work with somebody or tried to help somebody that was convinced they don't have a problem? Or if you guys remember back in Two Wives, how difficult it is to deal with husband number one, the person who might not have a problem and definitely does not think they have a problem. That's when it's hard. So now I kind of like take these friendly little jabs at Hank, but I build him up, because he's trying to sell to a tough customer. So this same company spends millions for research every year. Their cost of production is figured to a fine decimal point. They have recreational facilities. There's company insurance. There is a real interest, both humanitarian, so that prong that Hank takes, and business, which is, again, the other prong, two-pronged approach, and business in the well-being of employees. But alcoholism, well, they just don't believe they have it. And so what Hank's trying to get at is this idea of like, bud, you're spending all this money, like fine tuning for production, and you want to help your employees and you spend all this money on all these other ways to support it, but you're being blinded by your denial that there's a problem. Does that sound familiar? Anyone here ever being blinded by the denial that I don't have a problem? And you see, if I don't got no problem, I don't got no need for a solution. Oh, that was not good grammar. I did not grammar that well. Keep coming back. I'll learn my grammar, or probably not. It might get worse. Already. So it says, perhaps this is a typical attitude. We who have collectively seen a great deal of business life, at least from the alcoholic angle, had to smile at this gentleman's sincere opinion, which means he believes it. He believes it. He might be shocked if he knew how much alcoholism is costing his organization a year. That company may harbor many actual or potential alcoholics. And I might have spoken about this earlier in the Big Book study, but I can't remember. So I'm also going to talk about it now. And they were going to one of the chapters. So Hank was the primary author of this chapter, and this was the only chapter in the Big Book, excluding the stories, that was not like written, by Bill Wilson. But they were talking about some other chapters. Now, I do remember I spoke about this. One of the chapters that Hank had written was a Q&A chapter, like questions and answers, which was like a revolutionary like sales technique that he had like come up with. And he's like, yeah. And it was more chaotic than I am. And that's saying something because I'm all over the place. Now, one of the chapters that they had proposed but did not get written was a chapter on the potential alcoholic. Now, listen, when I came here, I did not like come here like buckets of willingness and open-mindedness. I came here with like andas. I came here with I'm young. I came here, my ex is worse than me. I'm not like you. You know what I mean? I came here with all those sorts of things. And I remember reading potential alcoholic and think, yes, that's me. Potential alcoholic. Now, I'll be frank with you guys. It's the only time in my life I ever thought I had potential. Yeah, potential alcoholic. I was kind of hoping like, a little bit of like diet alcoholism or like addiction light. So I could do, the easy breezy lemon squeezy version of the 12 steps, not the difficult lemon difficult actually having to do the 12 steps. You know what I mean? Turns out I was wrong. I don't even have potential there. I'm the real deal alcoholic. I'm an addict, like that's me. So I just thought that was fun little potential. All right. So we believe that managers of large enterprises often have little idea how prevalent the problem is. So in these big major companies, often the people who run them and work in them have no idea how much alcoholism is affecting, like, to be prevalent is to be everywhere, that alcoholism is run through this company. So even if you feel your organization has no alcoholic problem, it may pay to take another look down the line. You may make some interesting discoveries, which I think is him trying to do like what I was trying to do earlier, which was that cliffhanger. Like, oh, keep coming back next week. We'll talk about the third direction on what to do if you relapse after coming to a 12-step fellowship. Ooh, it's kind of like, ooh, take another look. You might make some interesting discoveries, a little hook us into, I don't know. Clearly I don't do sales. Uh, I don't have sales techniques. Now it says, of course, this chapter refers to alcoholics. You know how earlier when I was saying how alcoholics, yeah, we're hardworking, we're energetic, we work hard, we play hard. Thank you. Here's where we lose any of that like credential we got earlier on, like the compliments. That gets wiped out right here. So, of course, this chapter refers to alcoholics, sick people, deranged men. Rude, rude. I mean, and accurate, but like rude to call me out like that. Page 149. I was very unwell and I was not in the normal range. I know this is not the etymology of the word. I'm like, I'm deranged. I'm over here. I'm not ranged normally. That's not where the word comes from. I'm just making things up. Don't like go and be like, oh, I learned where the no. My grammar's bad, my etymology's bad, my vocabulary's bad. And I think I'm supposed to say it was poor, not bad. So we'll write some inventory on me with some terrible grammar. Alrighty. So of course, this chapter refers to alcoholics, sick people, deranged men. What our friend, the vice president had in mind was the habitual or whoopee drinker. So habitual would be, people that are like, finding their limits, going on some like mild benders. Whoopee drinker would be like a party drinker, the people that could go to whoopee parties, which now that we are recovered, we can attend a whoopee party if we are spiritually fit and going for the right motives. Now, the problem, of course, is finding a whoopee party in 2024. That's the real difficulty. Whoopee! So what he's saying is like, yeah, that's for people that are like drinking carelessly, who are being unthoughtful or careless or selfish, but not alcoholics. So it says, as to them, his policy is undoubtedly sound. Like that makes sense. But he did not distinguish between such people and the alcoholic. See, the difference is, a whoopee drinker or a habitual drinker can either stop or moderate, kind of think hard drinker, or even just like a young person that's being irresponsible. But the alcoholic, we have no control and no choice. And I'm just kind of emphasizing that for those that are new to the study. Lack of control once I start to drink or use, and lack of choice. What that means is when I say I do not want to do it again, that has no power, and I find myself doing it again. So, and this is some bad news for me. So it says, it is not to be expected that the alcoholic employee will receive a disproportionate amount of time and attention. Oh, lame. I want a disproportionate amount of time and attention. Attention me, and like I'm off on a tangent again. I'm gonna reel it in. But it's like, the worst thing about getting the attention or the validation or the approval is it's not enough. You know what I mean? I get it, and immediately I want more. I'm like, yeah, attention, time, validation, it's never enough. And it says he should not be made the favorite. Oh, but I want to be the favorite. I want to be the special one. But like just all the time, that's not unreasonable, is it? Yes, rude. And it says the right kind of man, and we're learning that this is not me, the kind who recovers Oh, I have recovered. Will not want that sort of thing. I'll be honest, still kind of want it a little bit. Just between you and me, just still kind of want it a little, you know. So it says, he will not want that sort of thing. He will not impose, right? To impose in this context would be that selfishness, that self-centeredness, making it all about me, thinking about what I can get. So if I am recovered, if I'm living this way of life, I'm focused on what I can give and how I can help. And we see this in this next sentence. It says, far from it. He will work like the devil and thank you to his dying day. So work hard and have that gratitude. And that gratitude in the context of two employers is because this employer has offered this new way of life to people like us. And I think we know that feeling of gratitude for the people that we in our lives that helped us along the journey that 12 stepped us. You know, that's a bit the context, but also, and so you'll notice that it's like he'll work real hard. He'll, you know, well, you'll have the best employees. So again, trying to sell us. Now, I will also say, like, yeah, we're meant to show up and give a fair day's work for fair day's pay. You know, like we're called to be honest and live with integrity. I don't have to, you know, work 16 hours a day though. So we can find that like God-centered approach to it. And actually, sorry, tangent again. Uh shocker, shocker that I would go on one of those. One of the things that can be really helpful is if work is an area that I struggle, I often remind sponsees that we don't work for company XYZ. Who do we work for? Well, I work for God. And if I show up to work with that in mind, that I work for the God of my understanding, I work for power greater than myself, that changes how I show up to work. Another thing that I've done with sponsees when they've really been struggling is we've taken some of their workplace situations through some of the sex inventory columns. I know, wild, with the purpose of creating and cultivating a work ideal, this ideal that I get to take to prayer on a daily basis in regards to work. So, just if you were looking for fun new ways to do inventory, and I know you were all on your edge of the seat for that, I'm about to get like blocked, you know, just block, shun, you know, never speak to her again. But that is something that can be done, and I have fun with it, and you don't have to. So he will work like the devil and thank you to his dying day. That spirit of gratitude. And there really is like, man, there is that thing of like when we've experienced that spiritual awakening, when we've been like cracked open by this power, it's hard not to be grateful. It's hard not to be enthusiastic. You know, when the change has happened, it's hard not to show up to life in a radically different way. And he goes on to say, today I own a little company. Now that little company was Honor Dealers. Oh, yes. And it's like Rob will correct me when I am wrong. And it was in regards to like car parts and automotive parts and like sourcing them out. I'm going to describe it this way, and Rob's going to be like, absolutely not. I think it was going to be like a car Amazon. I don't know. I don't understand business. And so he owned this company, and to be honest, it was circling the drain at this point in history. It was losing money. It was in the red, and they were, to be honest, focused far more on working with other alcoholics than they were, you know, selling car stuff. So today I own a little company. There are two alcoholic employees who produce as much as 5 normal salesmen. So again, he's kind of like, hey, you know, let's save the drunks. Look at the deal you get. You save 2 drunks, you get 5 employees, right? And he says, but why not? And this I love. They have a new attitude, and a new attitude is oh yes, hold on, Rob's got the actual thing. So they were gonna oops, oh, I went to the wrong thing. They were gonna provide where did it go? They were providing auto polish and that sort of stuff. I lost it in the chat. The chat was, yeah, I do the best I can and it's not great. Okay, wrap this up. They have a new attitude. And a new attitude is a beautiful description of a spiritual awakening. And it says, and they have been saved from a living death. Again, another beautiful description. Sneaky, You'll notice that Hank, he's going to avoid saying God or higher power, but a new attitude and saved from a living death, a beautiful, sneaky description of a spiritual awakening. And here is our experience. Those of us who work with others, those of us who take others through this work, this is our experience. I've enjoyed every moment spent in getting them straightened out. Working with others, it really is a joy and is it a privilege. And I'm not just saying that, like when we do this thing, it is incredible what happens. So and like it's a replicable experience. You know, if Hank was saying I enjoyed it, and we see some of those promises in step 12, and at least that begins to be our experience too. You know what I'm saying? So if you've not had the opportunity in working with others, I really want to emphasize, let us help you get there, because man, we don't want you to miss enjoying every moment helping others get straightened out. So with that, I will stop the recording, and or I'll get maybe Rob to stop the recording, because I'm like, where's the thing? I can't find it. And we'll kick it over and unmute and say